I'll be your best friend. I had a pretty lonely childhood. Didn't have many friends and was constantly bullied and had poor self-esteem. At 13 years old, I was basically just an unhappy, introverted child with not many friends. I would sit by myself at lunch with a book and sometimes wrote in my secret diary, and I often tried to deliberately miss class so I didn't have to interact with anybody. My school is pretty big, and it's easy to just slip out of the gates and hang out in the local kiosk, which sold refreshments and stuff. Most of the rebellious seniors would stay there during lunch break and go back to school right after it ended. Once, I was convinced that my day was terrible enough to make me stay back after everyone had left. I tried my best to look casual and carried on writing in my diary. I almost jumped when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I was just about to make an excuse and apologize to whatever teacher had found me missing class. I looked back to see this tall guy who looked to be about 19 to 20-ish. Could have been older or younger. He sat down beside me and instantly I felt uncomfortable. I remembered all the invasion of personal space lectures that I had relieved when I was a child. He gave me a wide smile, and I could see all his yellow-brown decaying teeth and could smell his breath, which smelled like, flatulence. He gave me a hug for no goddamn reason. I stood up and was ready to leave when he waved my diary in the air. I cursed myself for getting it there, and one of the most stupid things I've done in my life is to go back for the goddamn diary. I was afraid he'd read it. I was ready to snatch it, but surprisingly, he handed it to me and said the following words: "I know you don't have any, so I'll be your best friend." I ran back to school and wondered if I was just overreacting, as most of my conversations with people are awkward. I knew the hug was unnecessary, but he was probably just trying to be friendly, right? I couldn't figure out how he knew I didn't have any friends, which was not completely true. I forgot about it after a couple days and stopped venturing out of the school gates completely. I wished that it would end till there, but it didn't. A few days after the incident, I saw him walking aimlessly in my lane. I know everybody that lives in my neighborhood, and I'm not the least bit exaggerating when I say everybody. He was scrutinizing the nameplates and walked all the way to my house and stopped. I don't know whether he saw me looking out the tiny balcony, but he knew this was my house and he called my name loudly. He broke down crying and said that I was his best friend. I was alone at the time and I was freaking out. I called my older brother, who was at college quite a distance away from my house, and he rushed down to my house. I don't know what happened after that, but all I remember is that I was sitting in my room, crying. My old friend and roommate was a real sick guy. This is a story about a friend and roommate I used to have, who I blocked out of my life. I've known him for about 3 years. I have to start from the top to really explain what a sick and mentally ill person he is. I was a bit of a stoner a few years ago. My girlfriend had recently broke up with me, and all I wanted to do was self-medicate to forget her. Me and my cousin were out looking for weed one night. That's how we meet Joey. Joey was 4 years older than the both of us, and he dressed like a typical kid who wanted to be ghetto or gangster looking. He stood 6'5" and weighed 240 pounds. He was a massive hulk of a man. His personality at the time seemed like that of a big, friendly dog, a bit dumb, but funny and kind nevertheless. So we both let it slide. He was a hardcore stoner and collected numerous exotic pets like snakes and such. Although something was off about how he dressed, he'd match his do-rag to his sneakers and t-shirt and pants, which was a little bit funny. There's not many gangs in my area, but I would imagine in all red or yellow outfits with bandanas on, he'd attract unwanted attention elsewhere. If Joey was anything, he was a storyteller. He had a story about just everything, usually. It was a subtle or not so subtle brag story, you know? He was definitely loud, and a motor mouth. I usually just ignored him when he annoyed me or went home. My cousin had moved back home to work and I stayed behind. So, me and Joey quickly became pretty good friends, as I had no one else besides Joey and his roommates. Fast forward a few months and Joey appears to be the ladies' man sort of guy. An influx of women always passed through. Oddly enough, they were all usually single mothers or way older than him. I just let it be, but now after knowing him in retrospect, I'd say it's part of his mental illness and how he portrays himself to desperate women. Joey moves away for a few months but moves home, and he gets a new girlfriend, Tara, in the same week he moved back. Tara is a pretty normal college student and definitely not his usual overweight single mom type. One thing I learned was Joey portrayed himself as a sort of feminist and knight in shining armor to women, writing them poetry and shit. What happened over the next 2 years revealed a dark side of Joey I never thought he had, and one I'm finally glad to be free from. It was absolutely terrifying, and while I chastise myself for sticking around for so long, I've had many abusive relationships as the victim, and I just grew used to it, so it was unfortunate. I do blame myself a lot for what transpired, though. Anyways, to continue with the story, I moved with them and another couple. I felt like, why not move in with my best friend? He's a bit annoying sometimes, but everyone has their faults. I'm sure I'm annoying to other people at times. As if some switch flicked off in Joey's very core, he began to become very angry and explosive about the slightest thing going wrong, always threatening to violently attack other people and bad-mouthing me to his girlfriend and the other roommates. One night, I accidentally knocked his weed off his dresser on the floor, and to my surprise, he slaps me for it. I'm shocked, and I move out a few weeks later. I decide I'm never going back to live with that guy again. I move out, and slowly, Joey tries to get me on my good side again, and keeps saying he was abused by his ex-girlfriend when he moved away, and that his other roommates stole from him and his girlfriend Tara, so he was just in a volatile mood after everything went wrong. Being a naive, forgiving type, I accept his apology, and for the few months we hang out, he is generally okay in small doses. However, a few months later, I had to move out of my apartment, and I was flat broke. So Joey offers again to give me a place to stay until I get back on my feet. I accept having nowhere else to go, and they move all my things for me. It's only a few weeks later, and Joey is worse than he had been ever before. He beats his girlfriend's dog brutally. The police are called, but since the dog is the typical dumb, loving lug type, he runs to Joey all happy and playful. The police don't believe it, so they leave. Joey begins to hoard cats, like almost a dozen cats. He used to hoard reptiles in the same way, but he neglects them and lets them die. He's fairly neglectful and abusive of his cats as well. He never gives them clean water and just leaves the toilet up, and hardly ever changes their litter box. The smell becomes unbearable. Joey starts to break and throw things around the house. I usually lock myself in the room and let it unfold, scared to death, with 911 dialed on my cell phone. One day he pushes his girlfriend down on the floor. They make up, so I feel like if I call the police, they'll not believe me. He starts verbally abusing her about college, about sleeping with guys before they met, and one of them was a black guy. Joey becomes openly racist and calls black people he sees on the street monkeys and acts rude to them. I'm surprised he never got beaten up for it. They break up a few weeks later, and I plan on getting the hell out of there as well, but secretly, as I don't want to deal with his bullshit. He explodes one night, and I finally have the balls to say, if you lay one finger on me, I'm calling the police, leave me the hell alone. He goes back to trying to be a sentimental, romantic guy to win her back, but she doesn't want any of it. He eventually explodes and calls her a dirty whore. He dates a few different girls, but they find out he's just using them for money or marijuana. He puts a lot of weird and desperate statuses on Facebook, and writes his poems again. His poems are all pretty much I loved you, then you left, and I wanted to die. I found a new place in the weeks before I moved. That's when I learned something more disturbing about Joey than him just being an abusive asshole. One night, Joey isn't anywhere to be found. Good, I think. I get a phone call a few days later at 6 in the morning. Apparently, Joey had exposed himself to a 15-year-old girl, even though he was nearing 30 years old, and sent her pictures of his erect cock. Her parents had called the police on him. I pretend to care, then hang up, and report it to the police as well. A day or so later, he comes back home and starts moving out. He tells me this isn't the first time this had happened, and he likes to take out little girls to get ice cream and such. Young girls. Sometimes. He would point out little girls on the street and say they were attractive. And I thought all this time, he just had a sick sense of humor. I blocked him on social media and his phone number and told him I'm moving to a fake street address so he doesn't bother me anymore. It's been a month or so and I haven't heard back from him. I'm hoping the police charge him with luring. So, ex-best friend. Let's never meet again. My overly clingy stalker friend. I had a friend. A friend who I thought of as a brother. A friend I could talk to and a friend I told my deepest secrets. I met him at my school, or more specifically a sports day. I called him Joshua. It was the last day of school before the holidays. We hung around with a bunch of others and had some laughs, enjoyed ourselves. And after we exchanged our Facebook names, pretty normal stuff. It wasn't until the middle of the holidays until he messaged me. He just said hello and said he wanted to check up on me. Now, I should tell you that I'm quite a loner, and I've never had a proper friend since primary school. I'm in the 4th year of secondary school, so I was quite flattered by this. We started talking consecutively to each other. Around the same time I was moving house, he told me he only lived 10 to 15 minutes away from me, so we could really hang out together. I was really excited we would be hanging out. I'd never had a friend over to my house before, so it was a new experience. Fast forward a year later, we were now best friends. We discovered each other's interests, walked around the town together, went to the movies and went swimming, exchanged secrets. We did anything really. The problem was he had gone really clingy. I knew he wanted to get with me, but at this time I had a boyfriend, Charlie, and he knew this, so I was pretty annoyed. He insisted Charlie couldn't treat me right, or that he didn't really love me, and that Charlie would talk shit behind my back. When I asked for proof, he wouldn't talk to me for an hour. Honestly, I really didn't care because he was pretty annoying. He constantly tried to call me on Skype, but I was usually talking with Charlie, so he would try to get into the call with us. Charlie and I never really got time together because he had a job and I had to study, so he said no to Joshua most of the time. He would get salty and would say, "If you're really my friend, you let me join." But would apologize 30 minutes later for being childish. All my friends, the internet ones and Joshua at least, knows I'm a huge gamer and recently got into an MMO that was new at the time. I didn't tell Joshua that I was playing it because I didn't want him to trail behind me. He had already done it twice before and kept bugging me to always play with him. I had found a guild with great people I would raid with twice a week for a few hours. They were like a second family to me. A week later, he found out I'd been playing this MMO from a friend and signed up to join my guild. I knew it was him because he always used the same name. Not even a week later, he was kicked from the guild. Apparently, he would talk shit behind my back and would harass the female members. Plus, they just thought he was really annoying. He thought anything he said was comedy gold, and every second sentence was a shitty reference. He'd also interrupt the raid by coming into one of our voice channels for raiding and start blaring loud music. He got what he deserved, honestly. After hearing, he would talk shit behind my back, though, and deciding that enough was enough, I called him on Skype and told him I didn't want to be friends anymore. He didn't take this lightly. He cussed me out and threatened he'd bleed my secrets out to my friends, saying he'd ruin my life, and I hung up on him and blocked him. I had enough of him, and I thank God he was gone, or so I thought. I had forgotten he knew where I lived, because I had delayed seeing him for a month, and I prioritized my guild over him, and I really just didn't want to talk to him. About 3 weeks later, after getting Joshua out of my life, I noticed something that gave me chills. I'm an insomniac, and I like to look at the street lamps outside sometimes. I just love the glow of a stray street lamp in the midst of darkness. I had black roller blinds covering my window, and you couldn't really tell if someone was looking at you from the window. That's when I saw Joshua standing outside under the street lamp closest to my house. Outside my window is a balcony. You could easily climb up and down it because of the many ledges and pipes on the side of my house. It's how I would sneak out sometimes. I should also mention that I always had my window open because it was so warm in my room, and I didn't have a fan or air conditioning. But the past week it was freezing, so I kept it closed. I was friggin' terrified. I could see him staring at my window. I knew what he was going to do. And not 15 minutes later, I hear it. It's the scariest sound I've ever heard. He started climbing up the ledges and pipes. It was just quiet enough to hear the pipes banging against the wall. I was so glad that I had closed the window, because you could really easily slip in or out of it. I had turned off my monitor, just in case any light of sorts seeped through. I didn't want him to know I was there. I was shaking. My teeth were clattering and chattering, but I tried my best to stay quiet. I didn't move out of my room, because the floorboards were creaky and very loud, and if you were standing outside on the balcony, you could hear pretty much anything. I couldn't scream for help, because my mom had left to go out drinking, and my little sister was staying at my grandparents'. I heard the creak of the balcony. It was only a window separating me and Joshua. It became a waiting game, and it felt like minutes became hours. I heard him trying to open the window, but there was no real way you could open it unless you were inside. I think it was about 5 a.m. now. I hear my mom's car pull into the driveway, and I was extremely relieved. She began shouting at Joshua, and I could hear him jump back onto the pipes. My mom got inside and rushed up to my room, giving me a big hug and being glad that I was okay. We called the police, but they said they couldn't do anything unless he actually assaulted me. It's been 1.5 years now, and I still haven't seen or heard about him. He had just up and disappeared. But maybe that's for the best. Wherever you are, Joshua, let's not meet again.